Everyone has a story. Welcome to In Her Words, a podcast from women in entertainment where female creatives and allies share their stories in their own words.
This is a dedicated space centered on how to harness creativity for inspiring and impactful projects in the ever-changing landscape of entertainment.
I'm Renee Rossi,
I'm Gretchen McCourt.
and this is In Her Words.
Hi, everyone. Today we're shining our spotlight on a name you know well, New York Times bestselling author Jennifer Weiner. I got to sit down with Jennifer and discuss her latest best-selling novel, The Griffin Sisters Greatest Hits. This is such a great story that, no one can tell quite like Jennifer. She does women's stories, sibling dynamics, family dynamics like nobody else. This is a great conversation, and I think you guys are going to really love meeting her. I am so excited to meet you. Oh my gosh. So you have written so many of my favorite books, and I have to tell you that I'm holding it up, the new book, The Griffin Sisters Greatest Hits. So we got it last week, which is such a treat to get books early and get to read them. I was like, oh my gosh, am I going to have time to finish this? Or, it's summer and my kids, I've got lots of stuff going on. Jennifer, I devoured it in
Oh,
one night.
thank you.
I
That's
could not put
great.
it down. My husband was like, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" He's like, "I won't bother you. I know you're reading." It's such a good one.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to tell you everything.
Good, good. So we're thrilled to have you and get to meet you. So, like I just jumped in like a gushing, but the Griffin Sisters Greatest Hits is your newest.
Out there in the world.
It's a little bit different than some of your other books. You write the most amazing female, personalities and relationships and conflicts and sisters and mothers and daughters. And this one is kind of has all of those things in it. So I would love to hear about, how this one, how this came about. I'd love to hear how you decided to get into the music scene in pop music and the music world in this one. So just, yeah, tell us a little bit about that side.
Okay, so this book was born in Alaska. I'd never been. I'd always wanted to go. And a couple summers ago, my husband and I did this big trip and we went to Seward and we went to Homer and we hiked on the glaciers and paddled through the lagoons. And it was amazing and beautiful. And writers do a lot of listening, which is what I say when I'm being polite, eavesdropping, which is what I say when I'm being honest. And when you're in Alaska, you hear people talking about previous lives they've had or previous versions of themselves that they inhabited. Like there's someone who's like, I was a teacher and then I went through this divorce and then I moved to this tiny island where only 200 people lived and it was dark most of the year, all of these really interesting stories. And I started to think about a woman who was in Alaska because she had fled something traumatic. Something bad had happened and she had run away. And I could see this woman so clearly. I could imagine her in this like giant parka, kind of trudging around, carrying a bucket of cleaning supplies because I figured she would own Airbnbs and that's how she'd kind of support herself. And then it was just a question of, okay, who is she? What happened? What's going to happen? How do I get her to a better place than where we meet her? And I'd always been interested in pop music, pop stars, the way pop culture treats famous young women. And especially thinking about that like late 90s, early aughts moment where there were singer-songwriters, but there were also pop princesses like Britney and Christina and Mandy Moore and Jessica Simpson who came up sort of through the Disney machine of it all. So I wanted to talk about this lost woman, and I wanted to talk about music, and I wanted to talk about mothers and daughters because I've got now a teenager and a 22-year-old. And then it was just sort of putting those pieces together and figuring out how they all fit.
I love your well, did you stay in an Airbnb treehouse?
We
I was like,
did,
"Oh."
yes, we
Oh,
stayed in
okay,
a
so that was
tiny
I love
house.
that.
It was it was amazing.
When that part was at the beginning of the book, I was like, "Oh, I've seen those." I mean, there's the amazing section on Airbnb when it has all the crazy different
Yeah.
houses, and I wondered if you stayed actually in a treehouse. That's fascinating.
Mhm.
The daughter dynamic I love because I feel like you write them so I have a daughter. She is 18, getting ready to go to college, and I had 3 sons before her. I mean, she has 3 older brothers. Completely different, completely different. But, for Cherry in this book and then in The Summer Place, which I also loved, and, just the writing real daughters, I
Yeah.
think, is something that is so unique and wonderful that you do. Is that from being a daughter, from your own daughter, a combination?
Yeah, I'm a daughter. I have one sister. My mom had one sister, and now I'm the mother of 2 girls. So I have seen that dynamic from lots of different perspectives, and I I I've loved being a mother, right? I love my daughters. They are so different. Like there are things that are very similar about the 2 of them, but then there are things where like you would meet these 2 girls and not immediately perceive that they're related to one another. Like just different, different, different. And I I love listening to them. I love listening to them with their friends. I love listening to them when they're talking to each other. I've just always been so interested in that dynamic and sort of capturing the sound of a young woman as she's becoming herself, right? Like so my younger one is 17, so she's going to be a high school senior, so we're visiting colleges right now, and I feel like I'm watching her sort of trying on different identities, like she's pulling dresses out of a closet,
Right,
like,
right,
am I punk? Am I goth? Am I preppy? Am I this? Am I that? And like, it's just, it's this moment, this crux where like all things are possible. And then, of course, there's your mom telling you, don't do that. That's dangerous. That's not safe. Let me tell you what happened to me. And of course, they don't want to
right,
hear that. Like
right,
they're so much smarter than you are and they know so much more. And like the bad things that happen to you will never happen to them because they know better. And then they live a couple years and realize that maybe you did know something after all, and maybe they should be listening to you.
right,
So,
right.
I've loved being a mom of daughters and teenagers and young women and sort of just watching them figuring it all out. Like it's really been one of the great joys of my life.
Yeah, no, the daughter dynamic in your books, I just like I said, I just love the realness of it. The other thing that you do so well, and I also have a sister, so I love your sister dynamic, but I feel like all of your books, your family dynamic is different.
Mhm.
And I love that with they're a blended family, they're a single parent family, or maybe they're just a single person and that's, they're a family unto themselves.
Mhm.
And is that intentional that you're always changing up what a family can look like?
I so I always want to challenge myself as a writer. I always want to push myself to sort of think about things differently and not just do the same thing over and over again. But I definitely want to reflect the world as I see it. And without getting super political, I think that that's really important in this moment for readers in red states and in blue states to remember that there are many different ways to be a family, many different ways to build a family, to be a family, to exist in the world as a partner, as a child, as a parent, all of the things. And you know, no matter what the families look like, all the parents love their kids. Pretty much all the parents I've ever met or
Right,
imagined, like they
right.
love their kids and they want what's best for them. And they are doing the best they can with the tools they have and with their own histories and everything they bring to the table. So, I'm just trying to write the world as I see it.
No, I think it's fascinating how it changes from book to book,
Thanks.
and it really does almost make as a reader, I feel like I stop and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, this is a family and, one of this, they're a blended family because there was a divorce or a spouse had died or, there's just a lot of reasons why families become the way they do or start out the way they do." The other piece that I found so fascinating in this book and again, thinking about some of your other books is guilt.
Yeah.
And, as we laugh about, you talk about Jewish guilt, the Catholic guilt. We have mother guilt. We have working mother guilt. We have non-working mother guilt. We have why are only child guilt. We have too many children guilt. Or, all of the pieces. But I love that your characters and you like we see the actions of guilt and
Mhm.
how it manifests some of us just, let it eat us up inside at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then you have characters that take drastic actions in their lives because of guilt. And how has that kind of evolved or where does that come from? How has that evolved in your writing where how do you use that as a reason for the characters to be where they are, but some, like you said, some subtle and some big actions?
Yeah, I mean, so it's funny. I remember years and years ago seeing some very conservative person on Twitter back when we were on Twitter. And this guy was lamenting the lack of functional families on television sitcoms. He's like, "Why aren't there any shows where there's a mom and a dad and some kids and they're happy and they're functional?" And I'm just like, "Because there's no story there, my guy." Like, if everyone's happy and everyone's functioning,
Right.
where's the conflict? Where's the journey? Where's the story? And I think with guilt, I think that guilt is a motivator, like you said, for many of my characters. They feel bad about the things they've done, the things they haven't done, the things they should have done otherwise or differently or whatever. And I like the idea of guilt as a motivator, right? Because I think that all of my women are they're trying to fix what they broke, right? And they're trying to make amends to the people that they've hurt. But in the process of doing that, they're also kind of making amends to themselves, I think. Like they're on this journey of like, how could I have done better by my sister, by my daughter, by my mother? And in the course of taking that journey, hopefully, if I've done my job, they've also ended up doing better by themselves. I think that's why.
Yeah, no, it and your characters find seeing or feeling that they can't find their way out of it any other way.
Mhm.
And then, going on their journey and figuring out that this, almost this self-sentencing or this self-prison or this that they have put on themselves to pay for their actions doesn't have to be the only way out, I think is
That's the
the
other thing. I don't think anybody judges women as harshly as we judge ourselves.
right,
I think that's
right,
whether we're talking about our bodies, our parenting, the choices that we've made with money or with marriage or any of that stuff. I mean, I think that like the voice in your head is always so much more brutal than any voice you're going to hear from the outside world.
right,
Like the
right.
world will forgive you. The question is, are you going to be able to forgive yourself?
Right, right. That 3 a.m. Self-conversation is the
Mhm.
toughest,
Mhm.
that we'll ever have. Talk a little bit about your process now. Are you a by the pages each day type of writer, a time each day type of writer? And how has that evolved as you've become a New York Times best-selling author and, different from when you were starting out?
Yeah, okay. So it's it's been a journey. When I was starting out, I was a full-time newspaper reporter. I had a job at the Philadelphia Inquirer. Um, I got dumped. This guy broke my heart, and I wanted to write a book after 6 months of really pathetic moping. And thank God there wasn't Google because I would have just been Google stalking this guy like crazy. But you couldn't do that. I tell my daughters, I'm like, if you wanted to stalk a guy, you had to get in your car and drive to his apartment. Like there was no Google. We had to do things the
Sneak
hard
out.
way. And they're like, yeah, was it uphill both ways in the snow, mom? But so my first book I wrote while I worked full time. I would write on weekends and nights when I came home from work, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, but not Thursdays because my programs were on Thursdays. And then I would just like work during the weekend because, like I said, I'd been dumped. I didn't have much of a social life anymore. And that was how I wrote Good in Bed, which became my first novel. And then I had a 2-book deal. So I took a year's sabbatical from the newspaper to write In Her Shoes, which was my second book. And during that time, I got married, I got pregnant. I signed another contract, and it was sort of clear that newspapers were not heading in a healthy growth direction, let us say. It wasn't I mean, not that I was any kind of visionary, but at that point, you could sort of see what the internet was going to mean for classified ads, especially, which are the thing that kept newspapers afloat in part. So I left my job at the newspaper and I became a full-time novelist slash mom. When my kids were little, I wrote whenever I could. Like, if you asked me, like, "What hours of the day do you write?" I'd be like, "When the kids are sleeping, or when they
Right,
are at
right,
nursery school, or when I
right.
have a babysitter." It was just snatching whatever time I could find and using it as efficiently as I could. And then my daughters became teenagers and stopped needing me and in some cases wanting me so much.
Right, right.
So then I got my life back. And it's interesting. I'm doing this fellowship with a nonprofit here in Philadelphia where I'm giving some money and some time and some support to emerging female writers, and 2 of my fellows had babies during the course of the year-long fellowship, and one of them has 4 children, 4 sons. So they are all just so in the soup of, trying to find time to write while they're dealing with a newborn, or they're dealing with a toddler, or they're dealing with, little boys who are in elementary school and all that stuff, and I just keep telling them, just hang on. Like, you're going to get through this part and you will get your life back and you will get your time back. And you will probably look back on those years and it'll be a little bit of a blur and you'll wonder how you survived it. But at the end, it's like now, I'm practically a lady of leisure, right?
Right?
I am looking at the empty nest
Yeah.
with fear and trepidation. But the way it works now is I try to write, and it'll depend on sort of where I am in a draft, but usually I'll have some idea of how many words I want to get on the page or how many pages I want to get through if I'm revising or whatever it is I want to do. And I generally work kind of mid-morning to mid-afternoon, like 10 to 2 or 11 to 3. That's sort of my sweet spot. And then I've just got time to exercise or garden or play the piano or do whatever I want. And it's a little bewildering, it's like
Right.
I haven't quite gotten used to having all that time back. But, I I tell young moms to just if you could get a sitter, get a sitter. If you can get your spouse or your partner to take care of the kids for a couple of hours, I would never tell anybody to be one of those 5 AM people because I would never do that myself, and I don't wanna tell people to do things I would not do, but,
Right, right.
if it's getting up an hour early, if it's staying up an hour late, whatever it is, just try to find some time and not lose touch completely with the creative part of yourself. And then just know, like, there's always light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not always the train coming towards you.
It's always, there's always but no, it's funny that you say that because I know when I was in the thick of it with all my kids and there's, activities in the schools and working and everything, it was never a question of how am I doing this? Like, how am I getting this? It was always, what did I do before?
Yeah.
What did I do with all that time? And now
Right?
I'm like you, I'm at the end of my youngest is getting ready to go to college, and I'm like, what in the world? Am I gonna just like, am I gonna watch television? Am I gonna garden? What are it's very interesting how you make it work and then you look back and like, what did I do with all that time before I had kids and now after I do. But I do love that where it's like, yeah, find it in, you have to find the time in your real life and then knowing that other time will come. Um, as you as there's so with the characters and as you're creating a book, and a story, do you know if your stories are going to be sequels or if there's more than one book when you're thinking of your characters? You don't do a lot of sequels.
I've done well, okay, so with adult books, I've done just one,
One,
and
yeah.
I wrote a middle grade trilogy. So that I knew was kind of one complete story that I was going to tell in three separate books. But, you know, what I find for me, it's like when my characters stop talking to me, like that's how I kind of know that I'm
Mm,
done, like I've got them where I wanted to get them, I brought them hopefully to a better place. And then it's like, you know, it's not always like a happily ever after. It's more typically, I think, like a happy for now, as they call it in the romance world. But, you know, I I haven't had it happen in a while where a character I wrote will start kinda tugging at my sleeve again and being like, "Hey, there's more." Usually I'm kind of like I'm after all of the revising and all of the rewriting, like, I'm really happy to just be done and then I'm like somewhere in the copy edits or the line edits or the page proofs or whatever when I get another idea. So,
oh,
like,
okay, okay.
so
You kind of
usually I'm
moved
just like,
on
yes,
to
I'm very
yeah,
excited to just like move on to the next thing, because at some point a novel can sort of feel like you've been chewing the same mouthful of food for like an hour and you just want to be done and like move on. At least that's how it is for me.
okay, that's interesting. What about when your stories are getting looked at to be a movie, like In Her Shoes, or and I think there was another. Was it Good in Bed? That was
Good in
also
Bed's been optioned. Good in Bed has
option.
not
Yeah.
been made.
Ew.
Yeah, Ozempic is not is not my friend in that respect. It's like there's always just like one plus size actress at any given era. And
No.
you know, I've been Good in Bed came out almost 25 years ago. So, like, back in the day, everyone was like, well, what about Ricky Lake? What about Cameron Manheim? And now it's like, what about Megan Stalter? Like, and there's just always one,
Right, right. That
Um,
doesn't quite.
but
How does it feel to do you like the idea of the stories kind of going to the next set of hands, or do you stay hands-on? How does that
yeah, so
sending your little baby out to the world to someone for someone else?
yeah, it doesn't bother me. Like
Okay.
within her shoes, it was funny, but I think I had one of the like rare mentally healthy moments of my life where I was just like, I told the story I wanted to tell, and it's on the page in the book. Book is done. No one can change that. Like whatever happens with the movie, the book is the book. And so I was really, really happy to just let it be someone else's story to tell. And I know that that makes me unusual because I also was very lucky because I know that there are authors and I'm friends with some of them who something will get made into a movie or made into a TV show and then they'll sort of have to spend like the rest of their career being like, well, that wasn't what I wrote. Like, that wasn't how the book ended. Like, they changed the character, they did a different ending, or they whatever. I was really lucky because In Her Shoes was a really pretty faithful adaptation. But generally, I'm just like, look, if somebody wants to turn this into something else, like, go with God. And
Okay.
I just try to like keep my head down, work on the next thing. And that's another big piece of advice I give to young writers who are like, whether something's been optioned or something's being made or something's being looked at, it's just like, look, you really can't control that unless you're Stephen King and you get some like special deal where you get casting approval or script approval. Like most authors do not get those things. So, like, you can't control it. So, really, how much time do you want to spend worrying about something that is completely out of your control?
Right.
And
Right.
generally, the answer is like, I don't want to spend much time worrying about that. So it's like, just let it go and start working on the next thing. And that's what I tell people. And that's what I try
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
myself.
No, I love that, very healthy. Like, I wrote the book, and the book is the what I yeah, is what I wanted it to be, and someone else's vision may and there's so many factors that come into whether it's a series or a movie or, all of those, the financial time, all of those constraints that, that you don't have with the novel because you can make your book as long or short as you want.
Yep.
You mentioned the fellow group that you work with, and I feel like all of the lately we've been talking to a lot of authors and writers, and one of the things I've learned, and I think is really important for people, is how much support is out there. And, writers and authors talking about that they have a group of writers that they Zoom with a couple times a week or that they share pages with. And I think there's kind of a misconception of how solitary and how cutthroat and all of these that it is, but there's really a lot of community support that can be there if you want, if as a writer, if you want that. Has that changed over the years? What's kind of been your support group?
So yes, I mean, I have a group chat of like other kind of best-selling authors, and which is really good because like sometimes there are problems that you can talk about with someone who is like selling roughly as many books as you are that you cannot talk to somebody else about because oh my god, like uh, yes, it's there's unfortunately, there is a disparity, and I remember when I was just starting out, it was just like, it was not first class plane tickets. It was like, get off the plane, get a cab, go to your hotel, and then as you start selling more books, it's like, okay, we'll send a car, we'll have an author escort, you can stay at the nice hotel,
Right,
like,
right.
but in terms of support, like, I do think it is out there if you want it. And sometimes you might have to look a little harder than someone else to find it. Like, I think people who go through MFA programs, which I think are also can be very cutthroat, but I think you come out of that with a cohort. You've got your classmates and you're all kind of in the same place and just starting out and working and, and you can talk to those people about what that is like. But I also think like most authors really do want to help. And like whatever we've learned, whatever we've experienced, like we are happy to pass that knowledge along and be like, oh, when you go to this city, make sure you do this at such and such a bookstore, or you absolutely want to talk to this person at the publishing house, or like whatever it is. I think that people are generous mostly. And, you know, I think all of us remember what it was like when we were starting, trying to find an agent, trying to find a publisher, trying to get blurbs, trying to get, a book tour, like just that lives in all of us. And I think that, like, as long as you can remember what that was like, you are generally going to be as sympathetic and as helpful to people who are starting as you can. So there's
Well, that
plenty of community if you want it.
Yeah, that's great advice. I just, yeah, I think that there feels like there's more than just a common knowledge would make you think, oh no, this is something that you have to sit in your, your makeshift office and do all by yourself all the time.
Mhm,
But I love
mhm.
hearing about just the different ways community can be built if you want it to be built. Do you still like doing book tours and
I
being out and
do. Yeah, I mean, so when my kids were little, I loved them because they were like vacation, right? Like moving through an airport where I wasn't pushing a stroller and I wasn't carrying a
right?
diaper bag and I didn't have to like take somebody else to the bathroom. Like that was heaven, like a night in a hotel room by myself, that was heaven. And like I'm definitely a homebody. Like I like to be home. I like to be writing. I like to be in my little office, with my dog and all that. But I also love talking to readers. I
Oh,
mean, that
good.
sort of fills my
Uh-huh.
bucket up, because it can, even with community and even with friends who are writers, it can feel lonely and isolated because you're kind of just it's you and your story and these characters in your head for like a year or 2 years or 5 years. So going out into the world and talking to people who are like, your story made me feel less alone, or it kept me company, or it made me laugh, or I read it when I was in the hospital with my mom and she was dying and it was such a great diversion. Like whatever it is they want to tell you, it makes me feel like when I'm back at my desk, I'm sort of refreshed and recharged and like, okay, now I remember why I do what I do. So
Oh,
I
that's
like
so
it.
nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that is nice. So what's coming next?
Uh,
Now the Griffin Sisters is out
yeah.
and
So I'm kind of in the home stretch on a new book, which is about two writers. And I haven't really written about a marriage of two writers. And so this
okay.
is like a long marriage of two writers. One of whom is a very literary guy, and the woman is a little more popular. And it's the story of their marriage, and it's the story of what does it take to sort of live creatively, and how is it different if you're a man and if you're a woman, and based on what kind of story you want to tell. So I'm having a lot of fun with that. It feels very meta sometimes, but I really really like these characters, and I really like their relationship, just the story that I'm telling about this guy who's also the son of a very famous writer, and like all of the privilege but also the burden that leaves him with, and then this woman who is from a family of non-readers, and her parents don't understand her, and they don't, they think like writing's a nice hobby, but like you can't really do that for a living, and how is she going to support herself, and so there's a guy who's got like all of the support and encouragement in the world, and a woman who has none of it, and they get together, and how do they help one another? What are the stories they come into the relationship with, and what are the stories they're telling each other? And it's a lot of fun. So
Oh, I
that
love it. I love it. I can't wait.
yeah, no, it's I'm really enjoying it.
And do we have a date for it yet?
Um
It's still in the works.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna be probably spring or summer, not next year, but 2027.
Okay.
But, it's like I just finished a draft, and so I'm gonna actually be sitting down with my agent, and we're gonna be kind of, I think, moving some pieces around and like figuring out how it all fits and what the pacing looks like. And so that to me is really the fun part. It's like I love writing a first draft and just sort of getting it all on the page. But then when it's there and you can start like, okay, if this happens in, the first chapter, how's it going to pay off 15 chapters later? That
Okay.
kind of
Okay.
stuff. So I'm having fun.
Good, good. And is your team, your agent, your manager, have they been with you a long time?
So I'm on my second agent in my 25-year career, which is on the low end, I think.
Uh-huh.
There are writers who, have had 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 agents. I have my second agent, but she's got there's an in-house editor who works with her and works with her authors, which is really, really great. Like just another set of eyes and
Right.
another voice and sort of a developmental editor to kind of work through things with me. But yeah, that's my team. There's my editor, there's John who works with my agent, there's Celeste, my agent, and all the people on her team. And I feel very well supported. I feel
That's
very lucky.
amazing. That's great. I know we're over time. It's been so much fun meeting you and talking about books, your books that I love. I always love to end with what are you reading or watching that you're loving right now?
Okay. So I just started The Girls Who Grew Big, and I want to get the author's name right. It's Layla, and I just don't want to screw this up. Let's see. Layla Motley. She
Layla
wrote
Moll.
Night Crawling, which
Oh,
was
yeah.
an Oprah book, and she
Uh-huh.
was like the poet laureate of Oakland. And this is about teenage pregnancy, which sounds like a, after school special or something, but it's so good so far. I'm only like 50 pages into it. It's set in Florida. I'm not sure I recommend reading books set in Florida in July when it's like 90 degrees out, but it's wonderful. So 10 out of 10 recommend that one.
Okay, good. The Girls Who Grew Big.
Yep, that's it.
Okay, we will get that out there. But Jennifer, thank you so, so much for being with us today. It was so nice meeting you. We love your books. We love everything about that you do. But thank you really for taking the time. You've been
Oh,
so
this
generous.
was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to In Her Words. We hope you'll join us at womenandentertainment.com and go to our Substack for extended interviews and behind the scenes access.